Parallel compression is easy. First, make a copy of the original track. Then compress that copy, usually quite heavily. Finally, gently blend the copy with the original so that you maintain dynamics but add a little extra presence. Now, whilst this basic approach is quite simple, during this video we're going to be discovering several powerful variations. But first, this video is sponsored by DistroKid. Follow the VIP link in the description down below to get 7% off an already amazing price to distribute your music to the world. So how do we actually implement parallel compression in our DAW? Well, we start off with a source, the thing that we want to compress. In my case, it's some drums. Now, it may be that you've got just a stereo drum recording, and that's absolutely fine. Or it may be like me, you've got individual drum tracks all being sent to a drum bus, and that's what we can see here. Now, you're going to hear me use the term bus quite a lot in this video. In your DAW, it may be called an aux or an aux channel, or maybe something like a group channel. They're all the same thing. They're types of channels that can receive signals from lots of other tracks or other channels. So I've got my drum bus here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new empty bus. That's the one that we can see here in purple. And then I'm going to send a signal from my original drum bus to this new empty bus, creating a copy of that signal. That's where the parallel part of this comes in. We've got two signals exactly the same as each other being played alongside each other. And now what I'm going to do is bring in the compression part of it. I'm going to insert a compression plugin on that new bus that I created. Now, which particular compression plugin you use doesn't particularly matter. There's all different kinds that you can use. Today, I'm going to be using this one from IK Multimedia. It's called the Precision Compression Limiter. I really like it for this particular task. It's based upon a Neve 33609. It's not exactly the same, but it's based upon it. As I say, I really like it. I'll leave a link in the description down below for this and any other plugins that I'll be using in today's video. The important thing to understand here is I'm going to compress this so hard that it's actually not going to sound very good, and that doesn't matter. We'll see why later. So how do I get this to compress the drums really hard? Well, first of all, I've got the input set pretty high, so the signal is going to be pretty loud already when it hits the compressor. So a lot of the signal is going to be compressed. And to emphasize that further, I've got the threshold turned down pretty low. So pretty much everything is going to be above the threshold, which means everything is going to be compressed, or almost everything, I should say. Now, in terms of the release time, well, on this compressor, it's called the recovery time, and I've got it set to 100 milliseconds, and that's pretty fast. And what that means is that for anything that falls below the threshold, the sort of quieter parts, we're quickly going to allow that to come through. Okay, so we'll squash anything that's loud in the signal and allow anything quiet to be loud. Now, in terms of actual attack, well, I can't control that on this compressor. It's fixed at 1 millisecond. Now, 1 millisecond is not all that fast. There's lots of other faster compressors, especially when you consider things like, say, 1176s. But what that's going to allow to do, 1 millisecond, is allow some of the transient of the drums, that loudest part at the beginning of a drum sound, to come through. So we're going to get a bit of punch when we use this particular compressor with this attack setting. The gain control doesn't really matter. That would matter on this compressor if we were using the limiter section, which we're not, but it's basically there to control how much signal goes through to the limiter. Now, the ratio may surprise many of you. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, which is not a high ratio. However, I do think that when you're pushing it this hard, it's plenty enough. I did try it on like 3-to-1. It didn't sound that good, so I put it back to my kind of default for this, which is 2-to-1. Okay, so let's listen to these drums in the context of the rest of the track without them being compressed to begin with. Now, they're already kind of fine. These are pretty upfront kinds of drums, but I want to push them that bit further. I want to give them that extra kind of punch, and that's what this is going to be really good for. But before we go ahead and do that, I just want to listen to the drums in solo quickly so we know what we're comparing the compressed drums to. Have a listen. Okay, so that's our source material. Let's now switch our compressor on with all of those settings that we discussed and get yourself ready. This is going to sound really weird, not very good all by itself. Have a listen. You can just hear it sort of ducking in and out. Yeah, you can really actually hear the compression. But one of the great things is, as you listen to this, the kick and the snare have got a bit of extra bite and punch to them. Just have a listen again and listen out for that kick and snare. So that doesn't sound great, but what we're actually going to do is just gently blend it in with the original drum. So what I'm going to do is just turn the solo off. I'm going to turn the fader all the way down for this second drum bus that we created. And while we're listening, I'll just put on my oscilloscope so that you can kind of see what the effect is as we push this fader up. Okay, I think I like it about there. Let's just kind of have a before and after listen. I'll start off with it muted and then I'll unmute it so we can hear it sort of, you know, original and then with the compression. Have a listen. Now, I know many of you are going to say, well, because you've now got duplicates, of course, it's got a bit louder, and that is true. I would refine this by perhaps lowering the now overall volume of these drums because we can be fooled by the fact it's a little bit louder, but I think you'll find it's actually got quite a bit of extra punch to this, and that's what I was after. So you may be wondering if you really need to go to the trouble of creating an extra bus when you've seen lots of compressor plugins with a mix control allowing you to create parallel compression on the fly. Let's say, for example, this plugin from Arturia. We can see the mix control over here, and we can take that dry signal, that uncompressed signal, and blend it with that heavily compressed signal, getting a similar result to the one we just got. And that is a valid way of doing things. However, there's a couple of reasons why I don't actually use this feature very often. First of all, if you want to try out different compressors, it's really handy to have that bus and just bypass some or delete some and insert another one. Some may not even have the mix control, so it's really handy when you want to experiment. But more important than that for me is the fact that I often use other types of plugins in conjunction with the compressor. Let's take, for example, the drums that we compressed just a moment ago. We used this compressor from IK Multimedia, but you can see now that I've inserted another plugin next to it. And the plugin I've inserted is this one here. This is an SSL channel strip, basically, and I'm only using a small portion of this. That's the EQ section that we can see on the left-hand side. And I've just used that to boost some of the low end a little bit here at the bottom at 60 hertz or so. I've done a 3 decibel boost, and then I've boosted some of the top end. I've done another 3D boost at around about 8K or so up here, okay? And that's where all the sizzle of the snare and some of the hi-hat exists. And I felt that just adds a little extra something. You know, I couldn't do that using a mix control. So the result I finally got was this. Another example of using several different plugins on our parallel bus is with this, the Pultec Sandwich. It's one of my favorite techniques for lifting something like a lead vocal up above the rest of the mix. Now, I've actually solved this problem with this very song before using another compression technique, serial compression. However, it's nice to have different ways of doing things. Now, let's just have a quick listen to the track and you'll hear how the lead female vocal is kind of buried underneath the backing vocals and the other instruments.
Please believe me, though you feel me.
Now this technique is called the Pultec Sandwich because the first plugin on our parallel bus is a Pultec EQ. It's then followed by our compressor, an LA2A in this case, and then followed by another Pultec EQ. Now, before I get into exactly what I've done here, I just want to quickly explain Pultec EQs in case you've never experienced them before, because they're very different to other EQs. I'm going to pull up Plugin Doctor so we can see exactly what is happening as we adjust the controls. Now, with a Pultec, you're essentially just adjusting low frequencies and high frequencies. This isn't a surgical EQ. It's using very broad sort of sweeps. But the interesting thing is you can both boost and cut or attenuate frequencies at the same time. We get a really weird effect. So I'll boost the low frequencies here and you can see it's a very wide kind of sweep on this. Yeah, it's set to 100 hertz here, but it's affecting frequencies all the way up to like 5,000 hertz. So it's very, very wide indeed. So we'll boost those low frequencies, but we can at the same time attenuate or cut those frequencies. Have a look and see what happens when I do that. Yeah, we get these weird kind of shapes in our frequencies there. So it's really interesting EQ. Let's go ahead and adjust some of the high frequencies. I'll boost some high frequencies here and I'll also cut. And again, we get these kind of weird shapes there happening. So it's a very sort of organic and interesting EQ. I really enjoy using it when I'm doing broad sweeps like I am with this technique. So let's go back to the actual Pultec Sandwich itself and see what I've actually done. Well, in actual fact, let's start with the compressor in the middle. This LA2A is a kind of a gentle compressor normally, or at least it's got a fairly slow attack and release. But you can still compress hard with it. And I've done that here. I've pushed the peak reduction up really, really high. So we're squashing as much as possible. Now, the thing about compressors is they often react to low frequencies or they get triggered by lower frequencies quite easily. So what I've done with my first Pultec EQ is I have attenuated or cut the low frequencies. And you can see I've done that here with this attenuation control. That's going to prevent the compressor from responding to low frequencies because it's not really going to hear them. Now, I've also done a boost to some of the high frequencies, so I give those frequencies a little bit more of a chance of actually triggering the compressor. If I play this to you, which I'm not going to now, it would sound really, really weird. And we do this strange thing, which sounds a bit odd with this technique, but it seems to work, is where we replace what we took away after we've used the compressor. And we do that at the bottom with the second EQ, where we boost those low frequencies again, and then we attenuate or cut those high frequencies. That's our Pultec Sandwich. Does it work? Well, I'll let you be the judge. At the moment, we've bypassed this whole signal chain. I've muted my parallel channel. We'll start off with that, and then I will unmute it so you can hear the effect of this.
Please believe me, though you feel me, this is nothing new.
Now you can actually make more than one copy of your original material for parallel compression, but before we look at why and how you might do that, I'd like to remind you that if you're releasing your music to places like Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, etc., don't forget to follow the link in the description down below to our sponsor DistroKid. If you follow that VIP link, you'll get 7% off of your first year of membership. So why have I added yet another parallel channel for my drums? Well, this one is receiving only the kick and the snare, and its purpose is to make them sound a little bit more edgy, a little bit gritty. Now it's going to sound really extreme in solo, but it's going to be quite subtle when we blend it in later. Now the first plugin that I'm using for this channel is called Trash from iZotope. It's a distortion plugin, and if I solo the channel now, you will immediately hear what it's doing. Yeah, yuck. But I promise you it's going to work later on. Now, the next plugin that I'm using is the SSL channel strip here again, but this time I'm not only using it for some EQ and just bringing out some parts of the frequency range, but I'm also using it for compression here on the right hand side, and I'm really heavily compressing the signal yet again. Let's have a listen to how these drums, or this bus for the drums, is sounding now. Okay, now the next plugin that I'm using, the final plugin for this channel, is a limiter. This is iZotope's Maximizer, and I really do like this plugin a lot, and it's just going to further squash this signal. So now it's sounding like this. Probably not something you'd want by its own, but I mean, maybe you would. But I want it to be blended in, as I say, to give these drums just a little bit of extra bite. So what I'm going to do, as I did before, is start with my fader down low and gradually introduce it. Let's have a listen. Now this video is a part of a playlist of videos all designed to help you more easily understand compression via the use of visual tools and easy to follow examples. You can see a link to that playlist right here. Now if you think there's a compression subject I haven't touched upon yet and you'd like me to cover it, please let me know in the comments down below, because I'd love to make the kinds of videos that you'd like to watch. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Mike. I hope you're well, and I'll see you in the next video.